Lena had always lived in the quiet corners of her home, unnoticed, like a soft shadow behind her older sister, Raina. While Raina was the shining star, confident, elegant, and admired by everyone, Lena preferred books, plants, and helping her mother around the house. Her life was simple, almost invisible, but peaceful in its own way. Her parents often compared her to Raina. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" they would say, half in jest, half in disappointment. Lena would only smile faintly and lower her head. She never envied Raina, even when her sister became engaged to a wealthy businessman named Adrian Cole, a man who owned several companies and was known for his kindness. Everyone in town spoke of the grand wedding being planned. Lena only helped in the background, choosing flowers, sewing ribbons, and packing invitation cards. Adrian was polite to her whenever they met, though they never spoke much. He seemed genuinely in love with Raina, and Lena admired that. Their engagement party was like something out of a dream. Lights, music, laughter echoing through the big hall. Everyone was proud of Raina. She was marrying into wealth, into a respected family, and her future seemed bright. But life has a strange way of twisting stories when we least expect it. One evening, just a few weeks before the wedding, a phone call shattered the cheerful rhythm of their home. Adrian had been in a terrible car accident. His car skidded off a wet road and hit a divider. He was rushed to the hospital, but by the time Lena's family arrived, he was already in a coma. The doctor said his chances were uncertain. Raina was inconsolable. She fainted at the hospital, cried endlessly, and refused to eat for days. The wedding was postponed, but whispers began spreading quickly. Some said Adrian might never wake up. Others claimed he would live, but remain unconscious for years. The media caught the news, and soon the family was drowning in both sympathy and gossip. Weeks passed, and Adrian's condition didn't change. He remained still, breathing with the help of machines, his face pale but peaceful. Raina's parents started worrying not only about her emotional state, but also about the financial and social implications. Adrian's family was rich, powerful, and very private. The engagement had linked both families through business and reputation. Backing out now could mean financial loss and social embarrassment. Then one evening, Lena overheard a conversation between her parents. Her father's tone was tense. "If we break this alliance, we'll lose everything," he said. "You know how much we've already invested in the wedding." Her mother sighed. "But what can we do? Raina can't marry a man in a coma. She's too young to live like a widow." There was a long pause before her father spoke again, his words trembling. "What if Lena marries him instead?" Lena froze. At first she thought she had misheard, but her heart began to pound as her mother replied, "You can't be serious." "She's single and the papers are already in place," her father continued. "It would only be on paper for now. It will protect our family's reputation and ensure the business deal remains secure. Adrian's family will agree if it keeps things quiet." Lena's mother didn't respond. The silence was louder than words. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. The thought of marrying her sister's fiancé, especially one lying unconscious, felt cruel, almost unreal. But when her parents spoke to her directly the next morning, their faces looked desperate. "Lena," her father said gently, "this isn't about love or dreams. This is about saving our family." "We have no choice," her mother added softly. "You'll only be taking Raina's place for now. Adrian's family wants to keep everything private. Think of it as helping your sister." Lena's heart sank. She wanted to say no. She wanted to shout that this was wrong. But when she saw her mother's trembling hands and her father's tired eyes, the words stayed trapped inside her. She felt like a small boat being pulled into a storm she didn't choose. Raina didn't speak to her for days. When she finally did, her voice was cold. "You're lucky," she said. "You'll have his name, his house, everything." "Don't think I don't know what this means to you." Tears welled in Lena's eyes. "I never wanted this, Raina." "Then why are you agreeing?" "Because they're asking me to," Lena whispered. "Because someone has to." The next few days blurred into quiet arrangements. A small private ceremony was held at the hospital, away from the press. There were no guests, no music, no celebration, just papers, a few witnesses, and the faint sound of machines beeping near Adrian's bed. As the priest recited the vows, Lena's hands trembled. She looked at Adrian, lying there motionless, and felt a strange ache in her chest. His face looked peaceful, unaware of the world's chaos. She slipped the ring onto his finger. her vision blurred by tears. When it was done, she was now his wife, at least in name. After the ceremony, she sat by his bedside for hours, unable to move. The hospital lights flickered softly, and the only sound was the rhythm of his breathing machine. She whispered quietly, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I promise I'll take care of you." Days turned into weeks. Adrian's family, though distant at first, allowed Lena to stay in his mansion, saying she should maintain appearances. The mansion was enormous, filled with silence. The staff treated her politely but formally, as if she were a stranger. Every morning, Lena visited the special medical room prepared for Adrian at home. Nurses checked his vitals while she sat beside him, holding his hand and talking about small things, about the weather, the flowers in the garden, or how the city lights looked from the balcony. Sometimes she read him books, hoping that maybe, somewhere deep inside, he could hear her. Her life became a quiet routine, reading, helping the nurses, watering the plants Adrian once loved, and waiting. She didn't have friends to talk to. Even her family rarely called. Now that the problem was solved, Raina had moved abroad to recover from the trauma, leaving Lena to bear the silence alone. But something about Adrian's presence comforted her. Even in his stillness, she would sometimes imagine him listening, understanding, maybe even wanting to wake up. His doctor said that coma patients could sometimes hear familiar voices. That hope kept her going. One evening, as the rain tapped softly against the window, Lena sat beside him with a book. She read aloud until her voice trembled with fatigue. Closing the book, she rested her head near his hand and whispered, "I don't know why I'm here, but I hope you wake up soon. Maybe then all of this will make sense." For a moment, she thought she saw his finger twitch. It was so faint she almost doubted herself. She called the nurse, but by the time they came, his hand was still again. The nurse smiled kindly. "Sometimes it happens. Don't get your hopes too high." But Lena couldn't forget that moment. She began watching him more closely, noticing small things. The flicker of an eyelid, a slow movement of his lips, the faintest change in his breathing when she spoke. Whether real or imagined, these tiny signs made her believe that he was trying to return. Meanwhile, rumors started to spread outside. Some people whispered that Lena had married for money, replacing her sister for greed. Others pitied her, saying she was just a pawn in her family's plans. Lena avoided the news and stayed out of sight. She didn't need to defend herself. The truth, she knew, was hidden behind the walls of that quiet mansion, where a woman spoke daily to a man who couldn't answer. One night, as she prepared to leave his room, the housekeeper stopped her. "Ma'am," she said softly, "you're the only one who talks to him every day. Don't stop. I think he knows you're here." Lena smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "I hope you're right." She turned off the light, leaving a small lamp glowing beside his bed. As she walked down the hall, her footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. She didn't know what the future held, but deep inside, she carried a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the man who lay still might one day open his eyes and see her not as a stranger, but as the person who never stopped believing in his return. That night, for the first time since the wedding, Lena slept peacefully. Somewhere in the house, a heart monitor beeped faintly, and a man's finger moved ever so slightly, like the first whisper of life returning after a long, silent storm. Days in the mansion began to blend together for Lena, each one almost identical to the last. Mornings were filled with the quiet hum of machines, the smell of disinfectant, and the soft sound of nurses moving around Adrian's room. The world outside went on as usual, but inside those walls, time seemed frozen. Every day, she followed the same routine: breakfast alone, checking on the nurses, reading to Adrian, and spending hours beside him. Sometimes she spoke about random things: the color of the sunrise, the song of a bird she heard from the garden, or the way the housekeeper's cat kept sneaking into the study. She didn't know if he could hear her, but talking to him made her feel less lonely. There were moments when she wondered if this was what her life would always be: a strange marriage to a man who couldn't respond, surrounded by people who treated her like a visitor. But even in those moments, she refused to complain. She had made a promise that day at the hospital, and she intended to keep it. Adrian's family rarely visited. His parents lived abroad, and his only uncle, who managed the company while he was ill, came once a month just to sign papers and check on his condition. He was polite but distant toward Lena, speaking to her only about practical things. "You're doing well," he said one day, his voice measured. "Adrian's recovery may take time. Keep doing what you're doing." After he left, the mansion would fall silent again. Lena started to notice small changes in the house, things that reminded her of the man Adrian had been before the accident. His study was filled with books about travel, art, and business, but what surprised her most was a notebook on his desk. Inside were hand-drawn sketches of places, mountains, beaches, old towns, each labeled with short notes like "someday" or "next summer." She smiled faintly as she turned the pages. He had dreams, plans, and hopes just like any ordinary person. It made her feel closer to him, like she was slowly discovering the man behind the name. One evening, while reading to him as usual, she noticed something that made her heart skip. His right hand twitched very slightly just once. She froze, staring at it, afraid she might have imagined it. "Adrian?" she whispered, her voice trembling. She leaned closer. "Can you hear me?" The room was silent except for the faint hum of the machines. She waited for a sign, but nothing happened again. Still, the tiny movement filled her with hope. The next day, she told the nurse, but the woman smiled kindly and said, "It happens sometimes." It might not mean anything, but to Lena it meant everything. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat beside his bed, holding his hand and speaking softly. "You don't know how strange this feels," she said quietly. "I was never supposed to be here. None of this was meant to happen. But maybe there's a reason for everything." The rain outside tapped gently against the windows. The lamp by his bedside cast a soft glow over his still face. For a moment she imagined him opening his eyes and smiling, saying her name. The thought brought tears to her eyes. Over the next few weeks she began to see more small signs. His fingers sometimes moved when she talked to him. His breathing changed when she read certain passages. The doctor said there was slight brain activity improvement. Encouraging but uncertain, he called it. The news made her heart lift. She doubled her efforts, spending more time reading to him, even playing soft music in the background. She spoke to him about her childhood, her favorite foods, even her fears. It became her way of surviving the emptiness of the house. Sometimes she sat in the garden looking at the fountain and thinking about how her life had changed. Before all this, she had never imagined living in a mansion, surrounded by wealth yet feeling completely alone. The housekeeper once told her that before the accident, Adrian used to sit there too, watching the fountain while thinking about his next project. It comforted her to know she was in the same place he once loved. Then one morning, something extraordinary happened. While she was reading, Adrian's eyelids fluttered. It was faint, but it was there. Her heart jumped. She dropped the book and called the nurse. The nurse rushed in, checked his vitals, and said, "There's movement in the eyes. This is progress." Lena couldn't stop the tears from falling. She gently held his hand. "I knew you could hear me," she whispered. The doctor arrived later and confirmed it. "He's showing early signs of consciousness. Keep speaking to him, Mrs. Cole. Familiar voices help." Mrs. Cole. The title still felt strange to her. Every time someone addressed her that way, it reminded her of how odd her life had become. Yet hearing it now filled her with a quiet kind of pride. She wasn't his wife by love or choice, but she was the one who had stayed. Days passed, and Adrian's recovery continued slowly. His eyes began to move more often, though unfocused. The nurses said he could probably hear her, even if he couldn't respond. That thought made her heart race, so she kept talking to him. About everything. About the sun that rose beautifully that morning. About the meals she tried to cook but failed. About the letter she received from her parents that felt more formal than loving. She even laughed sometimes while telling him funny stories from the house staff. The sound of her laughter echoed in the quiet room, and she wondered if he could feel it. But not everyone was happy with her growing attachment. One afternoon, the uncle visited again and noticed how often Lena stayed in Adrian's room. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You're getting too involved," he said carefully. "Remember, this arrangement was meant to be temporary." Lena lowered her gaze. "I'm only taking care of him. The doctor said my voice helps." He nodded slowly but didn't seem convinced. "Just don't forget where your place is. When he wakes up, things will change." His words stayed with her long after he left. She knew he was right. If Adrian woke up, what would happen then? Would he be angry to find her as his wife instead of Raina? Would he want to see her again, or would he send her away? The thought made her heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. One evening, while she sat in his room, lost in thought, she heard something, a faint sound, almost like a sigh. She looked up quickly. Adrian's lips had moved. She leaned closer, holding her breath. "Adrian?" she whispered. His eyes shifted slightly beneath closed lids. "Can you hear me?" she asked again, voice shaking. And then, so softly she thought she might be dreaming, she heard it. A low murmur, a faint sound that could barely be called a word, but it was there. Her eyes filled with tears. She pressed his hand gently. "It's okay," she said. "You're safe. Take your time." After that day, hope became her constant companion. She felt it every time she entered his room, every time she spoke his name. Even the nurses began to smile more, saying, "He's fighting. You're helping him." Outside, rumors about the replacement wife started to fade. People had grown tired of gossip, and without new headlines, they moved on. Inside, Lena found a kind of peace in the routine she once dreaded. Some nights, when she couldn't sleep, she'd walk through the empty mansion, tracing her fingers along the railings and paintings. The house didn't feel as cold as before. Maybe it was because hope had started to live there too. Then one morning, as the first light of dawn entered the room, Adrian's eyes slowly opened. Lena gasped, nearly dropping the cup of tea she was holding. His gaze was distant, confused, but alive. He blinked several times, trying to focus. She rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. "You're awake," she whispered. "Thank God you're awake." His lips moved, his voice rough and weak. "Where am I?" "You're home," she said softly, trying to steady her shaking hands. "You're safe. You've been asleep for a long time." He stared at her, confusion in his eyes. "Who are you?" Lena froze. The words hit her like a wave of cold water. She forced a small, trembling smile. "I'm Lena," she said quietly. "I'm your wife." His brow furrowed, his eyes searching her face. "My wife?" he whispered, as if the word itself made no sense. She nodded slowly. "Yes." He closed his eyes again, exhausted, his hand still in hers. The doctor would later say that it might take time for him to remember things. That memory loss after a coma wasn't unusual. But as Lena sat there beside him, one thought echoed in her mind. How would she ever explain the truth of their strange marriage to a man who couldn't even remember who she was? Outside, the morning sun rose higher, painting the mansion in gold. For the first time in months, life was beginning to stir again, but along with it came the first hints of questions that could change everything. The day Adrian opened his eyes marked the beginning of a new kind of silence in the mansion. Not the quiet that came from loneliness, but the stillness that comes when people are holding their breath, unsure of what will happen next. Lena stayed close to his bedside, afraid to move or say the wrong thing. The doctors were amazed. After months in a coma, Adrian's recovery was nothing short of a miracle. But with that miracle came confusion. His body was weak, his voice soft and uncertain, and his memory fragile. He didn't seem to remember the accident. He didn't remember the weeks before it. And most painfully, he didn't remember Lena. When the doctor explained his condition, Lena listened silently, her fingers gripping the edge of her dress. "It's common," the doctor said kindly. "Memory often returns slowly. Sometimes people forget recent months or even years. What he needs now is calm, familiar surroundings, and gentle care." Lena nodded, though inside her heart was trembling. Familiar surroundings, yes. But what could be familiar about a woman he woke up to and was told was his wife, though he didn't even recognize her face? When Adrian was finally allowed to speak for longer periods, his questions began. Simple ones at first. Where am I? How long was I asleep? What day is it? But eventually his eyes turned toward her, full of confusion. "They keep calling you my wife," he said one afternoon, his voice hoarse. "Is that true?" Lena's throat tightened. She took a deep breath before answering. "Yes, it's true." He looked at her for a long time, as if trying to read her expression. "Did we know each other before?" She shook her head slightly. "Not really. I mean, we met, but things happened very fast after your accident." His brow furrowed. "And Raina?" he asked suddenly. "Where is she?" The question felt like a knife, but Lena kept her face steady. "She's fine," she said quietly. "She's living abroad now." He didn't ask more that day, but she could tell the question lingered in his mind. Over the next few days, Adrian began physical therapy to regain strength. He could sit up now, walk short distances with help, and even eat small meals. The nurses praised his determination, but Lena could sense something deeper, a restlessness in him. He was polite, gentle even, but distant. He thanked her often, for reading to him, for helping him walk, for arranging his medicines. But his eyes carried a quiet unease. It wasn't anger, not yet, but confusion. He didn't understand the world he'd woken up in, or the woman who sat by his side every day. One evening, after everyone had left the room, Adrian asked her softly, "Why are you doing all this?" "You don't have to," Lena hesitated. "Because I want to," she said honestly. "When you were asleep, everyone thought you might never wake up. I stayed because I believed you would." He looked at her for a long time, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said quietly, "Thank you." It was just 2 words, but for Lena, they felt like the first small bridge between them. In the following weeks, the house began to change. The silence that once felt heavy started to soften. Adrian's laughter returned slowly but surely. He would sit by the window, watching the garden, asking Lena questions about the time he had lost. He learned that months had passed, that business matters were being handled by his uncle, and that the world had moved on without him. "So much can change while you're asleep," he said one day, half smiling. "Yes," Lena replied softly. "Sometimes it changes in ways we never expect." He turned to her. "You talk like you've lost something too." Lena smiled faintly. "Maybe I have. Or maybe I just grew up faster than I wanted to." Their conversations became longer after that. He asked about her family, her hobbies, and how she ended up here. She answered what she could, leaving out the part about how her family had forced her into the marriage. That truth, she felt, was too heavy for him now. Sometimes when she spoke, he would close his eyes and listen carefully, as if her voice stirred something buried deep within him. There were moments, brief but real, when he looked at her with a kind of recognition he couldn't explain. One night, as they sat together while the rain poured outside, he asked quietly, "Did I ever love you?" The question caught her off guard. Her hands froze around the cup she was holding. She looked up, meeting his gaze. "I don't think love has a clear answer," she said finally. "But maybe it's something that can start again." He didn't reply. But for the first time, he didn't look away. As his health improved, whispers began to return around the mansion. The staff talked about how close the young wife and the recovering husband seemed. Some said love was blooming. Others said it was just duty. Lena ignored them all. She wasn't sure herself what she was feeling anymore, but peace never lasts long. One morning as she entered the dining room, she found Adrian's uncle waiting there with a sharp expression. "He's ready to come back to the company," the man said. "But before that, we need to settle some matters. The marriage, for example." Lena felt her heart drop. "What do you mean?" The uncle gave her a tight smile. "We both know this marriage wasn't real in the traditional sense. It was arranged while he was unconscious. Legally, yes, you're his wife. But morally, do you really think this can continue?" Before she could answer, Adrian appeared in the doorway, walking slowly but confidently. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice steady but cold. His uncle turned quickly. "Adrian, I was just explaining—" "I heard enough," Adrian interrupted. His eyes moved from his uncle to Lena. "Is it true that we were married while I was unconscious?" The air seemed to vanish from the room. Lena could barely breathe. She began, but her voice broke. Adrian's face went pale. "So it's true?" He looked at her, disbelief clouding his expression. "I didn't even know you, and they made you my wife?" Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't want this either," she whispered. "I was forced. I was told it was the only way to protect both families." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned away, his jaw tightening. "I need time to think." He walked out, leaving her standing there, her hands trembling. That night she didn't sleep. She kept replaying the conversation in her mind. He had every right to be angry, but the thought of losing the fragile bond they'd built made her heart ache deeply. The next morning, she found him sitting by the garden fountain, the same spot where he often went to think. She hesitated before approaching. He didn't look up at first. "I remember that place," he said finally, nodding toward the water. "I used to come here before the accident. It was peaceful then. I don't remember much else, but I remember this." Lena sat quietly beside him. "It's still peaceful," she said softly. He finally turned to her. "You should have told me the truth earlier." "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid you'd hate me for something I didn't choose." He sighed deeply, looking out at the fountain. "I don't hate you. But it's a lot to take in, to wake up and find your whole life rearranged without your consent." "I know," she whispered. "I would feel the same." For a while neither spoke. Then Adrian looked at her again, his expression softer. "You cared for me when no one else did, didn't you?" Lena nodded. "Not because I had to, because I wanted to." He studied her face quietly. "Maybe that's why I feel like I've known your voice before. It's strange. When I was in the coma, I used to hear someone talking to me. It kept me calm. Maybe that was you." Her eyes widened, tears threatening again. "It was," she whispered. "Every single day." He didn't say anything else, but a small, almost unnoticeable smile touched his lips. From that day on, something shifted between them. He still kept a distance, still processing the truth, but the anger faded. He began joining her for walks in the garden, sharing quiet meals and even listening when she read in the evenings again. The house no longer felt like a place of sorrow. It felt alive, even if neither of them fully understood what was happening between them. But deep down, Lena knew one thing: the truth had finally surfaced. And though it hurt, it was better than living behind silence. She didn't know if Adrian would ever forgive the circumstances that tied them together. But she could feel that for the first time, he was truly seeing her, not as a stranger or a replacement, but as the woman who had been there when everyone else gave up. And sometimes, when their eyes met in the quiet of the evening, she saw a flicker of something new in his gaze. Not confusion, not pity, but a question he hadn't yet learned how to ask. After the truth came out, nothing in the mansion felt quite the same. The air was heavy with things unsaid, and every time Lena passed Adrian in the hallway, she felt the space between them filled with quiet questions. Neither of them knew how to ask. Adrian spent more time outdoors now, walking slowly around the garden with a cane, rebuilding his strength. The doctor said his recovery was remarkable, almost like he was fighting for something unseen. But inside, Lena could tell, he was fighting for clarity, not just health. One evening, as she watched him from the window, she saw him stop near the fountain and look up at the house, his gaze fixed on her window. For a moment their eyes met, and she quickly stepped back, her heart pounding. Something about his look felt different. Not angry, not confused, just searching. Later that night he called her to the study. It was the first time he had done that since learning the truth. When she entered, he was standing by the desk, staring at the old sketches he'd once made before the accident. "Do you know what these are?" he asked without turning. She nodded softly. "Dreams, places you wanted to go." He looked at her then, his eyes calm. "You've been through so much because of me," he said. "You didn't deserve that." Lena shook her head. "It's not your fault. None of this was." He sighed and walked toward the window. "I keep trying to remember that day. The accident. The days before it. I can't. It's like that part of my life has been erased. But when I hear your voice, it feels familiar." Lena's chest tightened. "Maybe it's because I talked to you every day while you were asleep. Maybe part of you remembers." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe you saved me." The words caught her off guard. She didn't know what to say. There was something gentle in his tone, something that carried warmth but also sorrow. He sat down and motioned for her to sit too. "I spoke to my uncle," he said quietly. "He thinks we should annul the marriage, that it's the only way to fix things properly." Lena's hands went cold. She had known this moment would come, but hearing it aloud still felt like a deep cut. "I understand," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "It would make sense." He looked at her carefully. "Would that make you happy?" She hesitated. "What matters is what makes you free. You didn't choose this life." He leaned back, studying her. "And what about you? Did you ever get to choose anything?" Her eyes glistened. "Not really," she whispered. For a long time neither spoke. The sound of rain began to patter against the windows again, as if nature itself had decided to fill the silence for them. Then, to her surprise, Adrian said quietly, "I don't want to make any decisions yet. I need to understand more. About what really happened, about your family, about us." "Us," she repeated softly, unsure how to take that word. He nodded. "Yes. Because even if this marriage wasn't real in the beginning, something tells me there's truth in it now. I just don't know what that truth is yet." That night, Lena cried quietly in her room, not from sadness but from relief. For the first time, someone wasn't dismissing her story or pitying her. Adrian wanted to understand her, not judge her. The morning after the news headline reached Reyna, the mansion felt different. Lena had woken early as usual and was preparing breakfast when she noticed Adrian moving around in the kitchen. He looked more confident now, no longer leaning heavily on the cane, his steps firmer. The months of recovery had changed him, not just physically but in the quiet way he carried himself, the calm confidence in his gaze. He approached her and took her hand gently. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lena looked at him curiously. "Ready for what?" He smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made her heart skip. "To face the truth together. I've decided I can't keep avoiding it. I need to see things clearly and make my own choices, but I don't want to do it without you." Her throat tightened. She had feared this moment, yet longed for it. "What do you mean?" "I mean everything," he said simply. "I don't remember everything, but I do remember you. I remember the voice that kept me alive, and I want to start from there. No pressure, no family rules, no past mistakes. Just us." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She had dreamed of this day silently, hoping he would one day see her not as a stranger or a replacement, but as someone who truly cared. Just then, the housekeeper knocked softly and entered. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said to Lena. "There's someone here to see you." Lena's heart skipped. "Who?" "Your sister, ma'am." Her breath caught. Reyna. She hadn't expected her to return so soon. Reyna entered the room with her usual elegance, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. "Hello, Lena," she said, voice smooth but cold. "I see you've been busy." Lena swallowed. "Reyna," she said quietly. "I didn't expect you." Reyna glanced at Adrian, who stood silently beside Lena, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "You married him," she said slowly. "While I was away. Is that right?" "Yes," Lena said softly but firmly. "It wasn't my choice at first, but I stayed to care for him. Because someone had to." Reyna's eyes narrowed. "And now you think you can take what's mine? Do you really believe he belongs to you?" Adrian finally spoke, his voice calm but clear. "Reyna, it's not about ownership. It's not about right or wrong. It's about truth. And the truth is, Lena stayed when everyone else left. She didn't do it for money. She didn't do it for status. She did it because she cared." Reyna's face paled slightly. She opened her mouth to argue, but Adrian held up a hand. "I don't blame you for leaving. You had your reasons, but she stayed. That matters." Lena felt a rush of warmth at his words. For months she had worried he would see her as a pawn, as someone forced into his life. But here he was, acknowledging her heart, her courage. Reyna's voice trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. "And what about your feelings, Adrian? Do you feel the same for her?" Adrian looked at Lena, taking her hands in his. "I don't know everything yet. I can't erase the past, and I'm still piecing together my memories. But I do know that she is the one who kept me alive when I couldn't fight for myself. And that to me is more important than anything else." Reyna stared at him in disbelief, then turned to Lena. "You think he'll forgive you for this?" Lena shook her head softly. "It's not about forgiveness. It's about truth. And now he knows it." For a long moment, the three of them stood in silence. Then Reyna exhaled sharply, her face hardening. "I suppose. Congratulations are in order," she said finally, though there was no warmth in her tone. "But don't think this ends here. You will never have my blessing." Adrian's expression didn't change. "I don't need anyone's blessing to make the right choice. Not yours, not anyone's. I will decide my life for myself." With that, Reyna turned and left the mansion, leaving a faint trace of tension in the air. Lena felt a shiver, but she also felt a sense of relief. The confrontation was over. The past was acknowledged, and the future was theirs to shape. Over the next few weeks, life began to settle into a rhythm. Adrian gradually regained full strength, returning to light business meetings and social events, but always at Lena's side. He introduced her to colleagues, not as a replacement for Reyna, but as his partner, the woman who had helped him survive when he could not. The mansion felt alive again. Laughter returned to the halls, soft conversations filled the air, and the quiet that had haunted Lena for months was replaced by something warm and comforting. One evening, as they walked through the garden, Adrian paused near the fountain where they had shared so many quiet conversations. He looked at Lena, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "You've changed everything," he said softly, "not just for me, but for yourself too. You stayed when no one else would, and now we have a chance to start fresh." Lena smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I never expected any of this. I only wanted to do the right thing even when it was hard." He reached out and took her hand. "The right thing sometimes leads to unexpected happiness," he said, smiling gently. For the first time, Lena felt free. Not free from duty or family pressures, but free to live, to love, and to be recognized for her courage and heart. Their days continued quietly at first, then slowly, life opened up around them. They traveled together, visiting some of the places Adrian had sketched before the accident. Each trip was a new adventure, a chance to create memories they could call their own. Adrian's business flourished, but he no longer worked obsessively. He found balance, spending time with Lena, sharing meals, laughter, and simple moments. He often reminded her that it was her voice, her care, and her presence that had given him the strength to survive. One evening, after returning from a long day of travel, they sat together on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. Adrian took her hand in his, squeezing gently. "Do you ever regret staying?" he asked softly. Lena shook her head. "Never. Even when it was hard, even when I was scared, I knew it was the right thing." He smiled and kissed her hand. "Then I am lucky. Not because of wealth or titles, but because of you. You saved me in ways I can't even explain." Months later, the mansion hosted a small celebration. Not a wedding, not a grand affair, but a gathering of people who mattered. Close friends, supportive staff, and a few family members who had learned the value of honesty and courage. Adrian and Lena didn't need grandeur. They had found something far greater: trust, respect, and the beginnings of love that grew slowly, honestly, and naturally. Even Raina never returned to confront them. Eventually, she accepted that the choices had been made, that life had moved forward, and that the woman who had once been invisible in her shadow had emerged stronger, kinder, and more resilient than anyone had expected. Adrian and Lena's story became quiet inspiration to those around them. People spoke of how love and loyalty could arise from the most unexpected circumstances, how courage could shine even in times of despair, and how staying true to oneself could change the course of life entirely. Lena often remembered the night she first sat beside Adrian's hospital bed, whispering into silence, unsure if he could hear her. She remembered the fear, the loneliness, and the heavy weight of family expectations. And now, as she watched Adrian laugh at a simple joke, leaning comfortably against her shoulder, she realized something profound. Life could hand you impossible situations, and yet if you met them with patience, courage, and kindness, it could reward you in ways you never imagined. Adrian looked at her then, his eyes warm and steady. "We've come a long way," he said softly. "From that first day when everything was wrong and unknown to now. I couldn't have asked for a better partner." Lena smiled, feeling a deep, comforting peace. "Neither could I," she replied. "We faced the impossible, and yet, here we are." And for the first time, she felt truly happy, not because life had gone as planned, but because they had chosen to write their own story, together. In the end, the unimaginable had happened. A woman forced into a life she hadn't chosen discovered strength she never knew she had. A man who had lost everything found hope and love in the voice that never gave up on him. And together, they built a life not defined by wealth, family pressure, or past mistakes, but by honesty, courage, and the quiet power of human connection. The mansion was no longer just a house. It was a home. Their days were filled with laughter, quiet talks, shared dreams, and moments of understanding that could not be rushed. Every challenge they had faced became a thread in the tapestry of their life, each one strengthening the bond between them. And as they stood together on the balcony looking at the stars above, Lena realized that the story was not just about survival or family, or even love. It was about the unbelievable power of staying true to oneself, and the unexpected beauty that can bloom when hearts are brave enough to care. In the quiet of that night, Adrian whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." Lena smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "I never had a choice. And somehow that was the best one I ever made." The city lights sparkled below them. But in that moment, all that mattered was the life they had chosen together. A life born from courage, compassion, and the remarkable truth that even the most impossible situations can have the most incredible endings. In the days that followed, things began to shift. Adrian started inviting her for meals again, asking about her favorite books, her favorite food, even stories from her childhood. He listened when she spoke, really listened. She had never experienced that kind of attention before. One afternoon, as they had tea in the garden, he asked suddenly, "Did you ever love anyone?" The question made her blush. "I never had the chance," she said with a nervous laugh. "My family always made decisions for me. They said I was too quiet for love." He smiled gently. "Quiet people love the deepest." "You remind me of that every day." The warmth in his eyes made her look away quickly, afraid he might see what was growing inside her heart. As the weeks passed, his strength returned, and so did fragments of his memory. He began recalling small details. His last meeting at work, a dinner he had with Raina, a trip he had planned before the accident. The more he remembered, the more distant he seemed for a while, lost in thought. Then one evening he asked the question Lena had feared the most. Why did Raina leave? Her hands froze on the teacup. "She needed space," she said carefully. "Everything was too much after the accident. But she never came to see me after I woke up." Lena hesitated, her heart racing. "Maybe she thought it would hurt you more." Adrian nodded slowly, though his eyes remained thoughtful. "I keep thinking about her face, but it feels empty. I don't feel what I thought I should. Maybe time does that." He looked at her then, eyes soft but curious. "You've been by my side longer than anyone. Maybe that's why I feel more connected to you than to her." Lena's breath caught. She wanted to say something, but words wouldn't come. Over the next few days, Adrian's uncle began to notice their closeness and didn't approve. One morning he confronted Lena privately. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said sharply. "Adrian needs to focus on recovery, not on misplaced emotions. You've already gained enough." She tried to stay calm. "I'm not trying to gain anything. I'm just helping him heal." He gave a cold smile. "You're helping yourself too. Don't think I don't see it." His words hurt, but Lena said nothing. She had learned long ago that some people only saw what they wanted to believe. Later that day, Adrian noticed her silence. "Did someone upset you?" he asked. She forced a smile. "No, I'm just tired." He didn't believe her. "Was it my uncle?" She shook her head, but he didn't let it go. "If he said anything to hurt you, I'll handle it." His protectiveness startled her. "Please don't," she said quickly. "It's not worth a fight." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. "You're always thinking of everyone else first. Maybe it's time someone thought of you." That night, while Lena was preparing to leave the room, he said something that stopped her at the door. "I don't remember everything," he said softly, "but I remember the voice that kept me alive. I think it was yours." She turned, eyes glistening, unable to speak. "You told me stories," he continued, smiling faintly. "You talked about the stars, about gardens, about faith. Sometimes I'd hear you cry. I didn't understand then, but now, I think I do." Her voice trembled. "You really heard me?" He nodded slowly. Every word. Tears fell before she could stop them. For months she had spoken to him, thinking her words were lost to silence, but they weren't. They had reached him. The next morning, Adrian asked her to accompany him on a short drive. It was his first time leaving the house since waking up. They drove to a nearby hill overlooking the city. The wind was cool and the horizon stretched endlessly. "I used to come here to think," he said quietly. "Back when I thought I had everything figured out." Lena smiled softly. "And now?" He looked at her, the corners of his lips curving slightly. "Now I'm learning that life doesn't always follow plans. Sometimes it gives you the wrong road to reach the right place." For a long time they just stood there watching the sunset. The sky turned shades of gold and orange, and for the first time, Lena felt something inside her loosen, the weight of fear, guilt, and uncertainty. When they returned to the mansion, the uncle was waiting, furious. "You can't just disappear without telling anyone," he snapped. "You have responsibilities." Adrian's voice was calm but firm. "You're right, I do. And one of them is making my own decisions from now on." The uncle looked at him sharply. "What decisions?" Adrian's eyes flicked toward Lena. "All of them." That night, as Lena stood by the balcony, she could still feel the echo of his words. The man who had once been a stranger in a hospital bed was now the only person who made her feel truly seen. But deep down, she knew something else too. Life was never that simple. There were still truths waiting to come out, shadows of the past that could change everything again. And though part of her wanted to believe this peace would last, another part whispered that something, someone, would soon return to test it. Because stories like theirs never end quietly. They always find a way to twist when the heart starts to hope, and somewhere, miles away, Raina had just seen a headline on her phone. Businessman Adrian Cole makes first public appearance since Coma, seen with mysterious wife. Her eyes narrowed as she stared at the photo, Lena beside him. Smiling, she whispered under her breath, "So this is what you've been doing, little sister."